I think the question is misleading. I don't have an answer. Whether you should make it compulsory or not compulsory is pretty much up to you and how you're going to engage with your members. My talk is really to try and give you the ideas around how should you be tailoring the conversation that you're going to have with your members around choice. Okay? And the choice is simple. I think the choice is standard for all of us. We want to retire and have stability and not live on bread and water when we retire. But how do we get to that point, and how should we be tailoring the conversation? We basically want to make sure that as we transition ourselves through the retirement journey, we basically are taking less and less risk, right? And we want to make sure that our investment managers are doing a good job. When I'm 20, he's taking a bit more risk. When I'm 40, he's taking a little less risk, but not making too many losses. Then when I'm 50 to 60, he's kind of done a very good job with my money, but I am protected, right? And in our world, we are saying that the protection must not only be capital, it must be income, right? You must still be able to buy food, pay for fuel, buy your grandkids Christmas presents with the income that you're going to get from retirement. When my dad was working, he was working in a defined benefit fund. So when my dad was working, he worked for the National Railways of Zimbabwe, and it was a defined benefit pension fund. So he kind of said, okay, fine, I'm 20, I'm going to retire at 60, and my pension is going to be guaranteed. Fantastic. No risk to him or the rest of the company. I'm not my dad. I am in a defined contribution fund, and I need to choose. Do I want to be risky or do I want to be conservative, right? So the full risk is on me. Unbeknown to my dad, he didn't know that irrespective of the fact that your benefit is defined, it also depends on the economy you're in, right? So suddenly I'm now my dad's pension. He's in Zimbabwe. We all know what's happened to Zimbabwe. So defined benefit is only as good as the actual outcome of pension, right? And the outcome of pension must be able or must enable you to live, right? Your children are not your pension. You must tell my father that. But be that as it may, it's important as we are discussing as trustees that these savings that we are putting together and this promise that we are giving our members, will it actually deliver, right? So what comes to mind at this point in time is that with all these entrepreneurs that I spoke to yesterday, they were bemoaning, Botswana is so hard, Botswana is difficult, and, we can't make money here, and what. And I asked them, have you guys traveled to Zimbabwe? No. Have you guys traveled to Malawi? No. Have you guys traveled to Namibia? No. Have you guys traveled to South Africa? Yes. Every single one of those countries is having the toughest of times. And Botswana, 4% GDP growth, right? So we're complaining a lot in this country, but the governance framework and the way you've managed the economy over the last 20 years reflects it. Prudent management, and long may that continue. And you as stakeholders in the pension fund world are key contributors to that ongoing continued growth within the country and the decision-making you make now, right? But your decision-making is not being made in a vacuum. How are you communicating to your members how this decision-making is ultimately going to benefit them in their retirement? So most of you are on DC funds, and you're going to now try and sell to your members how this journey is going to navigate, right? When tailoring the message to your members, let's keep it simple, right? Remove all the noise and the investment jargon and the complication from it, because that's not going to help our members to make a choice, right? The second thing is, don't sell the dream and deliver a bad reality, right? You need to make it clear to them, as the slide before speaks to, and what many speakers have spoken to, is that this thing called defined contribution is not a guarantee. It's not going to guarantee that replacement ratio of 75% when you retire. It could be a volatile journey. But I think more important for us as trustees is that when you deliver that message, it must not be on the day that Gerald turns 65 and is a day away from retiring. You must be capturing the membership base the day they walk into your employ, the day they become members of the pension fund, and start communicating to them the fact that, yes, you may be 25, and yes, you may think that the world is your oyster, right? But when you start to getting to Mr. Hikwa's age there, and retirement is knocking on the door, it actually means something, right? More importantly, I think for younger members, we actually need to stop making pension boring, right? There are young members at the back there who are thinking, yes, when is Gerald going to finish? When's the party going to start tonight? What's on WhatsApp? All those things. And we're talking about pension using pen and paper, and we're not actually connected to these young members. The medium and the message that we're delivering, the message of pension, needs to change, right? So maybe the next office party that you have, call Tembi in and tell her to talk about retirement savings. Don't call Gerald because he's completely disconnected to average 25-year-old. And maybe the way she speaks will connect with the members when they're having that Christmas party or that Friday afternoon party better than any of you trustees, because you need to accept it, right? You're old and disconnected and boring to the young members, okay? Then it's important that you understand that the product that you're giving to your member, how expensive or how cheap is it, right? Because at the end of the day, what you're delivering, this thing that is called a pension outcome, has to buy things in a real economy, right? And the manner in which we grow this savings pot must be reflective of what you're going to buy in the real economy, right? So the choices we make now as to which investment managers to choose, which strategic asset allocations to be in, where in the globe you want to invest, all has a bearing to taking this pot to make sure it can buy real goods in a real economy, right? So let's go through that. So the one thing we are very what we advocate strongly for at RisCura is to keep things simple, right? We like lots of pictures. People understand pictures. Choppies presents you with 1, 2, 3 lines of tomato sauce, and each row of tomato sauce has 3 choices, and then you are saying to the shopper, decide which tomato sauce is the best. Okay. Then you go to another retailer and they only give you 1 shelf and they're giving you 3 tomato sauce bottles. Research has shown that the less choices you give to people, the easier it's going to be for them to make a decision, right? And to be honest, if you think about it, tomato sauce, retirement savings, your ability to buy things, how different is the taste? Heinz versus whatever. It's tomato sauce. So keep it simple. Same way, when we are now saying choice, we must make sure that the choice is simple and understandable to the member, right? That way, the member will actually make a decision. So I was talking to a trustee at lunch. They said that you call a member to a AGM or you call a member to a pension fund meeting, and the turnout is never more than 20%, right? Is that a common experience? Why? Why is the turnout only ever 20% or less? This is someone's future, their savings. Why are they so disinterested? We think one of the reasons is that they actually don't understand what it is they're talking or you are trying to impart to them. So maybe we need to actually change this thing that is called where the administrators here. You give it to us every year. See, I'm showing my ignorance. The benefit statement, right? Who actually understands their benefit statement when it's presented to them? Hands up. See, and then you wonder why only 20% people come. The next thing we need to also appreciate, defined benefit, my dad, NRZ, he thinks he's going to get paid, versus me. I must deal with uncertainty. I must deal with the coronavirus. I must deal with uncertainty within my defined contribution pension fund, right? And I employ clever managers like Stanlib and Investec and all those people to help me deal with the uncertainty and to make good decisions around that uncertainty. And I employ investment consultants to say, make sure I'm dealing with the uncertainty in the right part of the world, right? But the key message that we need to tell the 25-year-old the 20% that do come to our meetings, is that this road is going to be uncertain. Yes, you're going to get a pension, right? But it's going to be uncertain, and you need to appreciate that uncertainty. And you need to ask questions around the uncertainty of pension, right? And part of it is to actually simplify the benefit statement and the messaging that we are giving to the member. So the third thing is also understanding that this glide path that we're talking about, so you're 25 high risk, you're 40 medium risk, you're 50 lowest risk, has to be packaged within a product that must survive when a person is actually going to not only retire but beyond retirement. And that product needs to be priced correctly. You know, in Botswana, if you're talking about fixed income securities, there aren't enough. In Botswana, if you're talking about inflation-linked bonds, which is actually what's most important when a person is in the retirement age, how many inflation-linked bonds are there in this country? When was the last issuance? So how are you guys making your decisions? You know, why aren't there inflation-linked bonds in this market? What's the limitation? Maybe that's what we actually need to discuss. We've wasted our time this whole morning. Why aren't there inflation-linked bonds? Because ultimately, that's actually what you want. You want this capital to keep up with inflation, with the real world. But we don't have investment instruments out there to invest in that are going to keep this capital and the income growing in the real world. So at the end of the road, it's going to be bumpy, but ultimately you're going to get to a retirement age. And ultimately you're going to give your member some sort of choice. When you're positioning this choice, what we believe is that, number one, you need to make sure that the member makes a decision. Okay? Number two, when he's making the decision, you must not be in this analysis paralysis. So keep the decision-making simple. And more importantly, help them to decide what decisions are bad decisions. Generally, when a person knows what decisions they shouldn't be making, it's a lot easier for them to then take more prudent decisions with the decision options that are left and remaining. So yes, you're 25, and yes, you don't want to increase your voluntary contributions, right? At 25, you've got other things to buy, an iPhone 7X or whatever it is that 25-year-olds buy these days, okay? But you must know when you're 55, that iPhone, you can't eat it. And when you're 55 and you've only got 5 years left to retirement or 10 years left to retirement, you can't turn to an investment manager and say, make my investments work such that it's the equivalent of 20 minutes of sit-ups. It's not going to happen, right? So it's imparting that simplified message as to how the savings need to work throughout their retirement journey such that they actually achieve your goals. So going back to strategy, and to reinforce Tembi's point, where we spend a lot of time with our trustees is really to make sure that the objectives are very clear, right? Similarly, so if we are doing a good job in terms of making sure the objectives are clear, then it's going to be a lot easier for the trustees to communicate the outcomes of these objectives to the members, right? We spend a lot of time with the trustees in terms of making sure that when you're choosing between parking bay 86 and when you're choosing between parking bay 89, who's the best parking attendant for parking bay 86 versus parking bay 89? Specialist managers, specialist parking attendants. It's important. I'm not putting up my hand to go to China just yet, but if you look at just the numbers coming out from internet traffic at the moment out of China, no one's leaving their house, so everyone's ordering online or playing games or on TikTok the whole day, right? So from a manufacturing perspective, yes, Adidas is selling less than 50% of its manufacturing output, but Tencent and Baidu and all those internet stocks must be making a real mint because everyone is online. So that's now informed in terms of our tactical tint to say, for those managers that are exposed to China and China is getting cheaper, or for those managers that have no exposure to Rwanda and you should be buying Braliwa beverages, then that actually now is starting to make sense from a tactical perspective, right? So, in closing, I think what's most important now within our conversation with our membership is really for people to appreciate the journey that they're going to take, the fact that one must, I hate to use the term, but have not necessarily a long-term investment mindset, but you need to understand longevity risk. And you need to understand the role of your pension fund within longevity risk. What is longevity risk? How many people want to die tomorrow? How many people want to die next week? How many people want to live for the next 20 years and see their grandchildren grow and go to school, etc.? Right? It's more and more people. The whole point is that we want to live, or humans by nature, death is an inevitability, but we want to try and extend that. So we go to BOMAID and get medical aid and all those things, right? But we must remember that this thing that we're contributing of pension must live for as long as that aspiration. Right? So for us, I think when we are now answering this question of investment choice, it's very simple. Communicate it early, simplify it, and make sure the membership understands that it's going to be a transition over time from what are high growth portfolios to medium growth portfolios to low growth portfolios, which is kind of intuitive in terms of how you should be thinking through not only your own pension plan, but for those of your members.